mitigated them themselves by coming up with a transportation plan to deal with it.
Let's talk a minute about social navigators. And you mentioned the benefits that those provide to clinic patients. And I know you're aware that in the settlement, the stipulated settlement, the tribe has volunteered funding for a social navigator within the police department. So my question for you is, in your previous testimony with Ms. Nelson Gross, were you discussing the social navigator that will be working within the clinic or the social navigator working with the police department?
So I did listen to Mr. Simkowski's testimony and understand that there is going to be kind of an internal person like that, and then there's this potential for an external. So I would say that both of those things are beneficial. The external one clearly is going to serve that function for the clinic, and again, them being effective in that role, working with the other entities, will help the patients be more successful. I think, at least that's what I've understood. As to the other type of social navigator, again, I go back to, everything that we can do to make sure that social services in our county are being delivered more effectively and efficiently and have as many resources put to them as possible is to the benefit of our community and to lower police services.
You spent some time talking about the research and homework that you did in preparing the content of this letter. Is that the typical way that a chief of police would go about, a chief of police in a department like yours? Is that typical how they would go about forming opinions like this?
Well, I would say that for most CIPA, this certainly isn't normal or routine. I would say that we probably, me specific, I would say that I've probably bent over backwards to be as educated, informed as possible. I will tell you that cops in general always think the worst. We always plan for the worst, and then we're all tickled pink when it's slightly less than awful. So we have a tendency to be very cynical, and frankly, we would assume the worst. So I wanted to be educated. I wanted to be informed. I wanted to talk to people who had similar experiences and be knowledgeable before I put my opinion out there.
Okay, I do want to talk about what the individual police chiefs had to say. You talked to the Kelso Chief of Police, Dar Kirk. What did you guys talk about? How'd that conversation go?
It went pretty much exactly as it reads. I don't know if you want to get to that area, or if I'd like to refresh my memory. I don't know if you can scroll to it.
Oh, certainly.
Thank you. So specifically, I'll tell you that I tripped over an article, which is what brought me to Kelso's attention. The article was about a clinic that had moved into Kelso, and Deputy Chief Kirk was quoted in that article. And so it was an interesting result that by the time I got a hold of him, he had been made police chief. So in that respect, he was very familiar with the clinic because he had been involved in the issue since it came into being. So he specifically, as you can see there, drew patients from many, many counties. He had specific knowledge of it and could attest that there was no negative impact since its opening. Mr. Chief Kirk was also the one that mentioned to me this concept of a good neighbors agreement. And he actually sent me their copy of that. And that was a mechanism, I guess, to have some sort of MOU or handshake agreement that essentially kind of mitigated potential areas such as vagrancy, loitering, that type of thing. So, and again, his conclusion was that they had positive results working with the clinic and they had had no issues.
And did Chief Kirk opine on whether the clinic had caused folks who were homeless, who weren't living there before, to settle in Kelso?
Yeah, specifically, we had that conversation about the fact that it was drawing from 5 counties, and he had no impacts from those people coming and staying.
Okay. The Hoquiam Chief of Police, Jeff Myers, did he describe to you any negative impact from the clinic?
No, and I do apologize. I think I referred to him as Aberdeen earlier. Aberdeen, Hoquiam, you know, tomato, tomatoes. They're so close. They're even closer than Swim and PA sometimes. So anyway, yeah, it's actually the Hoquiam police chief that I had talked to, and he again had no public safety impacts. He did talk about transportation a little bit, I think. He's the one who brought to my attention, of course, not that I would not have assumed this, but he also talked about the fact that DEA is so stringent in their licensing and how much detail and monitoring and work that they do with the clinics, that he actually relied on their process much more so than anything that he did with his work.
For the Arlington Chief of Police, Jonathan Ventura, the clinic there is operated by a tribe.
Yes, that's my understanding.
And it had been there for 2 years. And did he identify any negative impacts from the clinic operations?
No, and I'd have to read this for a moment, but I think he was the one that thought there might be, and so he was a little, you know, he'd been paying attention because he thought there might be problems, and so he was, you know, kind of ready to experience those problems, and that's when you'll see there that I think he did the analysis about the suggestion of busing, and he found that 60% of the homeless population were locals, and of course the rest of them, right? We talk about kind of this transient homeless, and the fact is that's going to happen in any community. So the question is, did that go up? Did that actually increase?
And when Chief Ventura did his analysis on whether the clinic was attracting new numbers of homeless people, he concluded it did not.
Yes, specifically, you'll see in there that the homeless count changes seem to follow your normal fluctuations and patterns. So he could actually not point to anything that suggested there was an increase.
Okay. For East Wenatchee Interim Chief of Police Tom Robbins, did he identify any negative impacts from the clinic operations?
Yeah, you'll see when you read that Chief Robbins had been so shortly interim that he was not even aware that it was in the city, even though he did come from the neighboring city of Wenatchee. So he asked his deputy chief to speak to that and pull data for him. And so when he was referring to what he knew, he had educated himself based on pulling data and speaking with his assistant chief.
The Anacortes, the Deed-Wall-Leach Clinic sits within the jurisdiction of Anacortes, right?
Right.
And the chief there, Chief John Small, concluded there were no negative impacts from the clinic operating there.
Yes.
And he also concluded that there was no increase in the number of homeless people who were attracted to Anacortes because the clinic was operating there.
Yes, and again, the Deed-Wall-Leach does pull from a significant regional area beyond the Anacortes city limits. So they are bringing in patients through a shuttle system, very similar to what Jamestown is proposing.
If you're aware, does the Anacortes area have more homeless people than the Swim area?
I'm not aware. I actually don't know numbers to numbers. I mean, you know, when you discuss homelessness with every community, I will guarantee you that everybody's homeless problem is slightly more than what their social services can handle. I think that's universal.
But you also, maybe you didn't talk. Did you talk to the social worker there?
I did.
And did she also report that there was no increased number of homeless people in the Anacortes area?
Yes.
Of any police chief that you've spoken to, did any of them identify any negative impacts caused by the clinics operating in their jurisdictions?
No, none of them did.
Did any of them identify or describe the clinics as beneficial to their communities?
I can't remember if they specifically said that. I don't know that we got into a philosophical conversation as to, you know, yeah, I don't know that we got into that with any of them, whether I got into that with any of them.
The reason why I asked, Chief, is the last sentence of this paragraph talking about how the social worker in Anacortes is collaborating, said that it was a benefit to the community. And I'm wondering if that's your conclusion or if that came from the staff in Anacortes.
That is specific to Ms. Sutton, who is the social worker working with the Anacortes Police Department. So that was her conclusion. That was not mine.
And that role that Miss Sutton plays, being the social worker working in the police department, is similar to the social navigator that has been proposed in the tribe stipulated settlement, correct?
Yes.
And would you expect that that would also be a benefit to the SWIM community?
The social worker?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Wilkie referenced that there was some concern that police can't be trusted to talk about how much crime is in their area because their job depends on it. Do you have any reason to believe that any of the people you spoke to when you were researching this topic were not truthful?
Yeah, I actually believe the opposite. I mean, the fact is, if there is a problem in any of our communities, I will guarantee you the first phone calls are going to go to the chief's desk. So if you have a bleeding, oozing sore in the community, something that's really causing heartburn, if the first phone call is not to the city manager, then it's to the police chief. I would also suggest that the fact that every police chief lives and dies by transparency and community trust. We are all professionals. We all have to publish annual reports. We all have to, we have to live and die by our data. There's no benefit really for any police chief to blow smoke or not speak the truth. So I have no reason to believe that these chiefs would not be one, knowledgeable of whether or not these clinics were problems in their community, and secondly would in some way, shape, or form be hesitant to say that out loud.
Ultimately, you concluded that there will most likely be negligible impacts from the Jamestown Clinic. Do you see how this proposal created any significant adverse impact that should be mitigated?
No.
You've also reviewed the settlement, the stipulated MDNS conditions that were reached between the city and the tribe, correct?
Yes.
In your review of that document, did you identify any impacts to public services that caused by that agreement?
The agreement does not create any negative impacts to public services, no. In many ways, it goes much further in creating additional assurances.
Nothing further. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Well, before we get to Mr. Spence's questioning, we're almost at the 5 o'clock hour. I'm wondering if for the attorneys, does continuing this hearing till 9 o'clock tomorrow fit in your schedules to finish this off? Let's start with you, Mr. Spence. Yes.
In the morning, yes. I have a hard stop at noon, however.
For the rest of the day, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know we probably won't get done by noon. I mean, let me ask the other attorneys. I mean, how do you feel about if it's near schedule, just going until noon tomorrow and then finishing it off on Friday, I guess.
Actually, Friday's not good either. I'm sorry. I did not think this was going to be a 3-day hearing.
Yeah, me neither. So I guess till Monday, Mr. Spence?
Monday, oh God. Caught me at a busy stretch. Afternoon, I'm sorry, Tuesday's wide open. Wednesday's wide open. I'm sorry.
All right, okay. How about you, Mr. Murphy? What's your schedule looking like?
I will make myself available.
For any of those days? Okay, all right.
Any day, anytime.
I'm sorry, my computer is still spinning, so I'm trying to look it up on my phone. So are we looking at the November 23rd, or are we looking at any time between now and the Thanksgiving holiday?
Well, we're looking, actually the 24th, I believe, was the first full day that Mr. Spence has. So we could either, do it for 3 hours tomorrow and then finish it off, try to finish it off on the 23rd in another 3 hours. I think Mr. Spence said he had half that day available, or just wait all the way until next Tuesday and do the whole thing on that day.
Okay, I think it would be my preference to do a few hours tomorrow morning. I could make myself available, but and then finish it up on Tuesday. That's certainly my preference. But if we need to do the whole day of the 24th, I can make myself available that day as well. But I do not want to speak for Chief Crane as to her availability on that day. So, Chief, if you could comment.
I can certainly make all of those things work for me.
Okay, so well, let's do as much as we can tomorrow morning. You never know, we might get done in 3 hours. It's possible. Considering, as I mentioned before, I mean, no members of the public said they had to absolutely testify today, which gives an indication maybe they don't and on testifying a lot tomorrow or whatever. So let's meet tomorrow at 9, see how far we get done, and then maybe we need to go all the way to the 24th. So I think this is a good natural breaking point. So let's adjourn for this afternoon, and I'll meet tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. then.
Can I ask a question? Will we need separate Zoom instructions, or will the same instructions for today work?
Sam, can you answer that?
The same links that you guys used for today will work. I will, however, still send out an update for the extent, so you'll get another invitation should you need one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Martin. Good question. All right. Well, have a good evening, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner.
Good evening. Thank you.